Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast. I'm Conrad Olsson, founder and editor-in-chief of Scandinavian Mind. Today we are launching a new interview series in this podcast feed called Values in the Metaverse. In this series we will interview designers, entrepreneurs and experts working with concepts like digital fashion, Metaverse and NFTs. You've probably noticed by now that this is a topic that has been high on our minds the past year, and it's also the prime focus of our latest print issue of Scandinavian Mind. We decided to call that issue, and also this podcast, Values in the Metaverse. Simply because if we're going to create new digital worlds, or even a parallel digital universe, we need to think about what kind of world we want to create. What values we are bringing into it. This is the Nordic perspective we want to apply to this subject. And it's only fitting that we want to start this series with the cover star of our latest issue, Mr. Kerry Murphy, founder of the digital fashion brand The Fabricant. Kerry is a Finnish-American entrepreneur based in Amsterdam, and he's also a big proponent for what he calls the new digital fashion industry. The Fabricant has collaborated with some of the world's biggest brands like Adidas, Tommy Hilfiger, Under Armour and Puma. What started out as the idea for a digital fashion brand is now evolving into a new definition of what a fashion house can be. According to Murphy, the Fabricant's vision includes both a brand, a community, an educational platform, and a newly launched studio, which enables anyone to become a digital fashion designer. The idea being that bringing traditional fashion and textile experts together with 3D designers and tech developers, the Fabricant will lay the foundation for this new digital fashion world. I had a great time talking to Kerry. He's one of the most forward-thinking persons in this space. But before we listen to that, I just want to mention that I have started doing lectures and talks on this topic. Recently, I had the chance to speak to the entire menswear department of H&M, which I was really proud to have been invited to. In this lecture, I mentioned many of the projects and brands that we cover in the latest issue of Scandinavian Mind, including The Fabricant. And in an upcoming episode, we will publish outtakes from that lecture. And if you're interested in having us as a speaker, don't hesitate to reach out at conrad@scandinavianmind.com. Also, don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to stay updated on the latest news and learn about upcoming talks and events. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. Here now, my conversation with Kerry Murphy. Enjoy. All right, so I'm here with Kerry Murphy, the co-founder of The Fabricant. Kerry, thank you so much for speaking to me.
GM, thanks so much for having me.
So let's get right into it. When talking about concepts like digital fashion, NFTs, Metaverse, all these things that people for the last year have been kind of waking up to in the mainstream, which you have been into quite a few years, there's always this notion of trying to wrap your head around new concepts. And I meet that all the time when I explain these things to like family members or people who are not into it. And I'm always curious about, because I think everyone kind of had that moment in time when they realized the potential of some of these things. And I'm curious if you remember that type of moment in your life where you realized like digital fashion is going to be a thing, if it was like one pivotal moment or if it was like a series of, maybe a couple of weeks where you just couldn't stop thinking about it, obsessed about the opportunities. I'm curious, what was there like this light bulb moment for you?
Great question. And it has been many light bulb moments. But there's two moments that I always reflect back on and that I make references to, is that when I realized that every other design industry had gone through digital transformation and fashion hadn't, it was a very clear moment of like, oh, hey, of course it's going to happen in fashion as well. We've seen it with photography, film and visual effects, architecture, aeronautical, automotive, you name it. Like every big industry has gone through it. And now the moment of digital fashion has come. And this was around the 2016 moment. But when you started looking into it, there was not real data to show you that, hey, people are buying digital fashion right now. So that was something that was missing. But it gave me what I call a crystal ball look into the future, that fashion was going to be digital. I didn't know exactly how it looked like, but it was strengthened by the vision by my co-founder, Amber, who's a digital-only fashion designer and creative director at the Fabricant. She imagined this future where everybody will only wear one physical item of clothing overlaid by a digital layer of clothing. She said it was like a hologram back then, but I was never a big fan of the word hologram because it implies technology, and right now the hologram technology is very clunky and
right.
Doesn't work so well. So it didn't really show the vision of the future in a very good way. So we always said that that we're overlaid by virtual identity on top of our physical bodies. So regardless of how that's going to happen from a tech perspective, this is the future that we foresee. And, whether it's going to happen or not, it's our guiding light towards kind of this digital only fashion industry right now.
So that was the start. That's what you call AR, something digital laid upon like a traditional reality. That's where it all started.
Well, it's the blurring of the two worlds. It's the blurring of the digital world and the physical world. And right now we call it augmented reality. But in the future, we don't know what we're going to call it. Because we're not so focused on the hardware and the technology side of it. We're just really focused on how can we make fashion beautiful and emotional in the so-called metaverse. So in our virtual lives, how can we tell our stories? How can we really create our identities in our physical lives through digital fashion? Those are the guiding questions. And so then we're relying on Apple, Snap, all the big tech companies to come up with cool tech that will allow us to put all of the millions of digital fashion assets that we have sitting on our hard drives collecting dust right now because there's not enough people to use it. So we're just kind of waiting for that moment when technology catches up with our vision, and then we can basically just put it out there and the world will be ready to wear digital clothing.
Wonderful. I want to stick on that moment for a while. And you mentioned the word called identity, which to me is at the core of what fashion is about. I mean, we can talk traditional fashion. It's, garment. It goes back to the origins of time. We need to shield our bodies and protect ourselves. But when you talk about fashion, to me, the definition is identity. It's our projecting ourselves to the world, and whether we're super conscious about it or less conscious about it, we all do it, right? So take me back to those early conversations, perhaps with you and Amber. What was it about? Because I'm sure you talked about these definitions back then. How did you define fashion?
Yeah, great question. I need to rewind back because this was like 6 years ago. I remember just meeting up with Amber just from the very first conversation onwards. Like we were very aligned on like what the future vision is, and a lot of the conversations were, okay, how can we get people to wear digital clothing? Like, what is the true value of digital clothing? Because, like you say, with physical clothing, it's to cover your body. That's the functionality, but the true functionality of clothing are our identities, are the stories that we're telling. So we really needed to focus on that, especially because once we started, rolling out with our work, everybody was like, oh, digital fashion, that doesn't make any sense. That's pretty stupid. How do I touch it? How do I wear it? I want to smell it, like all kinds of weird things that people were saying in 2018, 2019. And we're just kind of like, well, if we don't want to have that conversation anymore, we need to focus the value somewhere else other than the wearing part. So we really started focusing on the identities, and that was kind of our leading conversation as well, of trying to understand like what is the true emotional need that people have with clothing. From all the way from the hardcore fashionistas to the people who so-called don't care about fashion, because that's also a statement. Like anytime we decide to put clothing on our bodies, it's a statement and it's a form of storytelling and it's a form of identity. So how can we create that experience? I will always call it, we need to create an interactive digital experience that's better than the physical experience as a digital experience for people to care about. So that's the conversation that's been going around since the very beginning. And that's what we've been building since the very beginning. And we all only feel like we're kind of in the second week of building that experience.
4 years in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, we'll get to the Fabricant and the concept, and I want to get into the weeds on that. But you mentioned there was two sort of light bulb moments. Maybe I missed the second one, or what was that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't actually get into that. It's my favorite reference. Kodak. Kodak was the monopoly for like 100 years in the film industry. They went bankrupt in 2012, simply because they refused to do digital transformation, or they started it too late, or because they were so inherently in their DNA an analog film company that they didn't understand what digital film meant. So all the things that they valued around analog film was, of course, not there with digital film. And they went bankrupt in 2012. So my question always is, like, who's going to be the big fashion house that goes bankrupt in the future because they refuse to digitize? And, that's 100% sure going to happen because they still value that old traditional craftsmanship, when in fact, digital is also craftsmanship. It just takes craftsmanship to a different place, to a different level. So the things that they value in the traditional fashion industry are going to start disappearing. I just think it's going to be a generational change, so kind of like when the new generation, the kids of 15 who love playing Fortnite right now and playing Fortnite, buying skins on Fortnite will start emerging. They're going to start demanding for those digital experiences. And there's still, fashion companies who pride themselves on not being on social media, not having an e-commerce channel, not doing anything digital because they're so inherently in that kind of like craftsmanship of the physicality side of it. And that's great. I love that. But it's not going to be part of the future. We can't deny that, digital is not going to be part of our futures. Our lives are becoming more and more digital. So that's why it's super important for brands to embrace this and understand this and keep their integrity in place while embodying new technologies. I think that's going to be something that's going to be very, very crucial for these brands. So definitely Kodak's story, one of my favorite ones, because it just kind of informs us of what's going to happen in the future again.
And has that also given you sort of confidence to go forward with this, even though I'm sure you get people around you that are less bullish on this and want to shoot you down?
Yeah, absolutely. We still have to spoon feed a lot of people and convince them. But we try to avoid those conversations because you can't convince somebody who's so self-convinced of themselves that this will not happen. So that's why we really focus on people who do understand it, who are open-minded, who are curious, who are asking the questions, because the questions are more important right now than the solutions. And we just need to get into that energy and get into those places where people are building and really building from a place of value rather than like, this money is in digital. We need to do digital because that's where the money is. That's not the right way of building.
Mm. You mentioned a generational thing, and I want to get into the concept, and I also want to talk about the sort of legacy fashion brands and what their role will be. But we'll leave that aside. But I just want to mention, my favorite sort of eye-opening moment in my life. It's coming up on a year now. I think it was last spring where my daughter, who then was 10, was calling from me from the other room. She was shouting like, Dad, do you think I should wear this cap? And I get into the room and she's not wearing a cap physically. She's holding up her phone with her avatar in a red cap. And the sort of, the light bulb moment for me was that not that she was wanting to buy a stuff for her. It was Roblox, I think. Like she's been doing like microtransactions, buying things, features, levels, whatever. But she said, do you think I should wear this cap? Mm. So for her, it was her identity. It was an extension of herself. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking about it, and I realized it completely makes sense. She comes home from school. That's where she meets her friends. That she can hang out there for a couple of hours with her friends, talking like constantly about stuff, not only about the game. She's like talking about stuff that happened in school. She's like me, hanging out there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she's going to care about what she looks like in that environment.
Well,
I don't have a question about that. I just want to share that. But what I'm curious about is, how do you see the generational shift? Because now I think in the past year, people have been opening up to, obviously Facebook made their big announcement. Microsoft has said they're going to do like metaverses for Microsoft Office, and that kind of makes sense. But where do you see the generational shift? And will Fabricant blow up only when my daughter's generation will be old enough to pay for these things? Where do you see that going into it? Who is your target group?
Yeah, that's great speculation right now of trying to understand what are all the steps that we need to take, knowing that this will be the biggest thing in the future, but not knowing when it will be, so that's why it becomes quite strategic and to have a proper understanding of like, how do we keep moving forward? And I think the answer there is that we just keep focusing on the target audiences that do understand it, but also the target audiences who do have the purchasing power. Because your daughter is still not making money, but she grows up with this idea that digital assets do have value, so 10, 15 years from now, when she has her own job and, she's going into these digital experiences, she will be part of our target audience. But of course, by that time, there's going to be thousands of different digital brands already. So right now, if we're going to really talk about who is the Fabricant targeting right now? Well, right now it's the so-called crypto bros, the people who understand digital assets on the blockchain, people who understand the user experience of using digital currencies on the blockchain, because those are the people that typically see the most value when speaking to traditional fashionistas. They're scared about blockchain, they're scared about digital experiences, they're scared about our digital lives. They're like, I still want my real life experiences, my real life events. I still want real clothing. I want to go to real fashion shows. So we will definitely have to wait a while, let's say 2025, 2030, something like that before we get like true mainstream adoption throughout the whole world. But, there's already millions of people buying it. And a great example again is all the games that exist. Fortnite generating like 60 million a month from skins, all the Activision Blizzard games and League of Legends. Most of their money is made from the in-game assets. They just have like non-sexy names right now, in-game asset. Nobody wakes up in the morning of like, oh my God, in-game assets. I'm so excited. But when you change that dialogue into something different, and when it's really about identity and fashion and storytelling, then it becomes something different. That, I'm waking up today and I need to ask myself, well, what am I going to wear in the metaverse today? What am I going to wear in my virtual identity today? How do I want to present myself today as this virtual person? And again, I love the example of your daughter, because she doesn't differentiate, like she's interacting through a computer, through a virtual medium, and just hanging out with her friends in the metaverse. They're not playing no like first person shooters, it doesn't have to have a point other than this kind of socializing and community perspective. I think community is one of the biggest keywords that's happening right now in the Web3 space that we really need to focus on. So we're really going to go after the people who already have this virtual existence, and they hang out in Discord and Roblox and Twitter, just having conversations with the whole world. And the great thing about it is it's connecting us to the whole world. So, geographical limitation is like the easiest thing to solve. So if you think for any fashion brand who starts, let's say in France, and they know China is the biggest market, it's so hard and so difficult to actually get into China and start connecting to those consumers. But we as a metaverse native company, we can do that today super easily. And we already are. We're a multinational company with, remote workers all over the world. and audiences all over the world, and constantly getting people from Japan, Argentina, Hawaii, all the corners of the world asking about digital fashion. So it's the easiest way to scale, and that's why I say digital fashion will be way larger than physical fashion, is the scalability. That's like one of the core things that will make us more successful than physical fashion brands. No supply chains, no expansion plans, which are like super difficult to do. No, everything in the so-called metaverse where the whole world comes and connects. Does that answer your question, by the way, or did I just ramble there?
No, I think all of these aspects are super fascinating. I don't even remember what my question was almost. But on that note that you just mentioned, and you write that you have a white paper out on Medium that kind of sort of, outlines the vision and concept of the Fabricant. And I just want to pick up on that. You write that I think it's your vision that is to lead the fashion industry towards a new sector of digital-only clothing that wastes nothing but data and exploits nothing but imagination. I really like that wording, and I'm curious because my entry point into this was as a journalist covering the apparent issues of sustainability and harm on the planet from the traditional fashion industry, and it was my sort of reasoning that, well, if my daughter's generation can spend less money on physical clothes and we can sort of ease the pressure on the planet that way, and she can spend, the need for her identity in digital worlds, perhaps it's not obviously so. It won't happen by itself, but it could be a way forward in terms of sustainability. Has that been part of the conversation for you guys as well?
100%. So, like I said, scalability was one of the key things that's going to make us bigger than the physical fashion industry. Sustainability is the other one. And the thing is, sustainability has been at the core of everything that we do since the very beginning. And this very idea that you just mentioned right now, we can get those emotional fixes in the digital space. We just need to create that digital experience that's better than the physical experience. And, it's really about identifying people's psychological needs, but also understanding their socioeconomic backgrounds. Why does somebody go into Primark or H&M to buy 6 bags of clothing to walk out of there only to wear once or never on their body? What is that emotional need that drives them to do something like that? And it gets very, very deep, and we don't necessarily need to go into that right now. But the sustainability is everything that we've been talking about since the very, very beginning, since day one. However, sustainability, again, is not what gets people out of bed in the morning. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to work on the sustainability of the world. And there are great people working on the sustainability side of things. And we're big advocates for it. We have a sustainability report on our website on what is digital t-shirt production costs versus physical t-shirt production costs, and how does that work in the advantage of digital with sustainability, with because we have to think about energy use, but the physical fashion industry needs to think about water use, materials, so many more other things. So the result of that, in very short, is that we're actually 3% of the carbon footprint from physical fashion. So, but
is that low?
Yeah, 3%.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've done like research with the Imperial College in London about this. Very, very extensive research, and other players have done the same, and everybody comes to the same results. It's 3%. You're welcome to download that report from our website. So, but again, sustainability is not something that gets the people going in that sense. Get people excited about digital fashion. Oh, I'm going to wear digital fashion because it's more sustainable. No, nobody's going to do that. So that's why we need to think about the value proposition of digital fashion. And it's in the identity side. It's in the experience side. And the experience will be the key to crack that. Because like I said, once we have a better digital experience when it comes down to shopping clothing versus the physical experience, and right now it's like e-commerce channel, white page with flat 2D items, and you're just kind of like, it's very informative. And I always talk about the informative versus inspirational. Now, going to the high street it's an emotional experience. It's a curated experience. As soon as you enter the store, you're already getting a wave of emotions. There's music, there's art, there's people. Everything's curated in a way. There's smells, there's colors. So it becomes something that it's just nice to do. That's why window shopping is a term, because you just go and look at it just because you like it. Now, how do we create that digital experience that people are like, I don't want to go out to the high street. I want to actually have a digital shopping experience because it's gamified, because it's interactive, because it's fun. That's kind of the world that we're going towards to. And there's some fantastic people already building there, including us. But the gaming companies are actually giving us the biggest view on what an interactive experience will be. And again, because it will be so different, a traditional fashionista, somebody in their mid-30s or mid-40s and older right now, probably won't care in their lifetime about this. But it's your daughter's generation who will be just like, oh, hey, I'd rather hang out in the metaverse. I'd rather go shopping with my friends all over the world in the Decentraland Meta Mall, whatever. There's going to be thousands of these experiences, and just buy digital clothing. And for the, I'm not saying for the physical fashion industry that it's going to completely replace that. No, it's going to be additional. It's going to create additional value for the physical fashion industry, where people who buy digital items, they could actually say, oh, I actually want the physical item for this as well. But if anything, I think people are going to be more intentional of like what they buy, because of the sustainability aspect, because they realize that they also don't want a big closet with massive amounts of clutter, because my generation is taught with this idea that a closet needs to be the size of a full room, and that full room needs to be full of clothes, hundreds of items that you hardly ever use, and I'm kind of in between, because I have let's say a laundry room, and it's got a big closet, and it's like taking majority of the room, and I'm just kind of like, what a waste of space. It's like, how many items do I actually use in this closet? And I'm constantly trying to get rid of stuff and recycle and sell things away, but it just seems like my past is still kicking me in the ass when I was doing that emotional buying. That's really, really hard to get rid of this stuff. So, of course, I live in the bubble where I see the sustainability aspect being very big. Now, how do we get other people to see it and believe it, and also just kind of live and breathe by that? That, again, is going to be part of our challenge, which is to present them with a vision that's way stronger and way better for the planet. So honestly, I can talk about sustainability for hours, but I'll pause right there.
Yeah. I'd love to get back to it, and we'll see how far we go with this hour that we have scheduled for right now. And just going back to traditional fashion, it's interesting how they really dropped the ball on the experiential aspect of their online presence with sort of the white grid of the products. It's almost like something that it's something for someone working in the warehouse or something, not for the consumer.
Exactly.
But I think it's time for us to talk about the Fabricant, and I've been having you talking about this concept now for 25 minutes without having you present your innovation and your company. So just for starters, give us the headlines for the Fabricant. What's the elevator pitch, and we'll go from there.
So I just finished an investment round. So for 3 months, I was doing nothing but elevator pitches straight away. But that was like a little bit over a month ago. So let's see if I can get my elevator pitch straight. But it always depends on who you're talking to as well. So knowing what kind of an audience is there. So it always needs to change. But the elevator pitch for the Fabricant is, and you already actually basically said it from our Medium article, but how we're really just focusing on the future. The Fabricant is building the digital only fashion industry. So we're not only building a fashion brand of where we design digital clothing and people can wear digital clothing, we're actually building the digital only fashion industry. So if you think about what is the fashion industry right now, all the way from, let's say, cotton farming or wool or creating polyester, all the way to recycling, upselling, and everything in between. So essentially the PLM, product lifecycle management systems that exist where they're, trying to define every single point. Now, what does that mean in the metaverse? What does it mean to farm cotton in the metaverse? What does it mean to create wool in the metaverse? It's a completely different function. So how do we not create a literal translation of material creation in the metaverse, but we make it something like farming algorithms, farming digital sheep? It can get very playful, and there's a lot of games who are already doing that. One of them is called Wolf.game, which is basically a game of wolves and sheep, where you're producing wool, but the wool is actually connected to a cryptocurrency itself. Like, okay. Look it up. I love that experience.
I will.
It's like a very, very simple 8-bit looking game, but then connected to decentralized finance systems as well. And our main question is, how will we build this industry? What are our focus points? And right now, what we're focusing on is the wardrobe experience. It's the buying experience and it's the wardrobe experience. Me buying digital clothing, me having a wardrobe with digital only clothing, and then the so-called wearing side of it. So what does wearing mean with the Fabricant? Well, right now it's augmented reality filters using Snapchat Camera Kit. It's optimizing assets for NFT games. And when I talk about NFT games, it's like Star Atlas, which is on Unreal Engine, Sandbox, which is on Unity, and multiple other ones. And then constantly doing that optimization of those assets so they can live in the so-called metaverse. And then, of course,
portability. You're able to put the fashion pieces of garments, digital garments, into various different metaverses and environments, right?
Exactly. So I love that word, portability. In the so-called very technical terms, it's sorry, English is not my first language. So
that's why you're here. That's why you're here. The Scandinavian Mind.
So the words just drop out of my mind. But yeah, let's call it
interoperability. Is it that word?
Interoperability.
There you go.
Thank you. Portability, interoperability, almost the same thing. So interoperability is something that we talk about all the time. Very important. And then, of course, the sharing to social media. So there's kind of like a niche trend that people send in pictures to a service, and this service puts digital clothing onto the pictures themselves so people can share them on social media. We're not per se doing that, but it's along the lines, because we want people to interact and so-called wear digital clothing. But wearing, of course, that will evolve as the technologies evolve as well. And then we need to create this experience, which is all about creating digital clothing. So we want people to become creators of digital clothing, similar to what the smartphone did. Again, one of my favorite examples. Smartphone made everybody a photographer, made everybody a videographer, everybody a content maker. So all of a sudden, my mom is taking pictures and, of landscapes and people and sharing it on social media. So essentially, she's a photographer. My mom never thought that she would be a photographer. She says that she's not creative. We're creating the tool that makes everybody a digital fashion designer, or at least gives them the sense and the feeling that they are designing these clothes. And right now it's just like, picking materials, picking items, and creating unique combinations. And a great example of that is, again, in games. When you're creating your own avatar, there's fantastic games like Cyberpunk 2077, Red Dead Redemption, and many other games where you need to create your own avatar. And that's a so-called avatar configurator. Well, we're creating a very powerful clothing configurator, garment configurator, where you get to design your clothing to the point where you're choosing buttons, where you're choosing stitches, where you're thinking about the seams, where you're thinking about all the details. And it's your creative expression connected to the digital only clothing, and that you get to own that, and you get to wear it, and you get to sell it in the so-called metaverse. This is the starting point, and from there we're just going to expand to these experiences that goes all the way to the beginning, which is one is the material creation. How do you create materials in the metaverse? All the way to the end, which is recycling. What does recycling of digital clothing mean? Upselling of digital clothing, to sell it more than you bought it for. That's already happening. What else? That's like, there's so many different experiences that we can think of for digital clothing, but you need to change the meaning of it in the metaverse, because vintage digital clothing just happens to have a different function and different experience than in the real world. So we need to create those experiences. But that's what I love about the Web3 world as well. It's so-called decentralized. So we don't have to do that all on our own. We just have to build a community of creators who are going to build it together with us. And it's not only us who have that vision right now. There's multiple other great companies who are doing that already. So the metaverse is not going to come from one company. It's not going to come from Facebook. It's not going to come from Epic Games. It's going to come from the whole world of creators and builders who are going to start connecting. And again, to come back to that word, interoperability, the portability, that's going to be the key to success when we talk about the so-called metaverse itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so
well, it's going to be interesting to see, just picking up on what you said about vintage clothing. I'm sure there are certain aspects about digital vintage clothing that's going to be kind of the same as physical clothing, because styles differ over the years. So when looking back at 2022 and some of the first garments that you released and people released on your platform, perhaps they will be felt like it's so 2022. And in that sense, they're not going to be worn out in the same sense, but maybe they'll have like an outdated style and whatever, the Gen Zers, the old Gen Zers,
absolutely. But the great thing, because again, the experience is different, because you have the timestamp on the clothing, because it lives on the blockchain, the exact very moment that it was created. And you get that history connected to it. So how that digital item travels throughout its lifetime is going to be connected. So you're going to have like historians seeing, what wallet owned this digital fashion item. Where has it been? You can be like, oh, Kanye West owned this item at some point, which is going to give it like additional value. Similar like what we're doing with physical clothing right now, that our museum piece is about to kind of wither and be blown away if they're not protected in a proper manner. Well, digital clothing is there to stay. And that kind of history, provenance, legacy, the storytelling aspect is going to be super visible, which is going to create more value for these items. But that being said, there's also going to be a lot of noise because, so many digital items can be made. So it's going to be really hard to find what is valuable and what's not. And that's why I love that there's these digital archaeologists coming up. As somebody who just is going through blockchain right now, finding wallets from like 2015 that hold like 10,000 Bitcoin and has never been touched. And, just kind of like, oh, there's a massive gold mine there, but I can't access it. That's kind of going to be similar for fashion, not only for fashion, but any digital asset, where you're just going to be able to look 500 years from now to this moment of 2022 of like, oh my God, this item was done 500 years ago. And then they're going to be auctioning it in like Sotheby's 5.0 of like, okay, now we're selling this digital fashion item for billions of Bitcoins. That's kind of where the future is heading at.
I like that, the digital Indiana Jones scouring the internet for rare collabs. Let's circle back to the Fabricant, because I think we still need to sort of explain what you're trying to do. I think from many of the earlier articles and when I started researching digital fashion, obviously your name came up as sort of the digital fashion brand, and you have done quite a lot of collabs throughout the last couple of years. It's been everything from Tommy Hilfiger to Adidas to Napapiri and Under Armour, a bunch of sort of kind of legacy brands. And didn't you at some point do the Carlings project?
No, we didn't do that one.
No, I'm sorry. That came up in the research. That was wrong. But what I wanted to get to is, and what you said in the beginning of describing the Fabricant is you don't want to be one singular brand. It's not like the Fabricant and Amber is the designer of the Fabricant. You're actually creating a much bigger sort of ecosystem, and it's being kind of launched right now or during these weeks. Can you talk about the studio and how that works?
Yeah, so we talk about the concept of digital fashion house. So what does that mean? The traditional fashion house designs clothing, produces clothing, sells clothing. That's a fashion house. Well, the digital fashion house is much more than that. And it's anybody can define what is a digital fashion house, but what it means for us is having that label where we design clothing, where we have the craftsmanship of fashion. And for me, that's the part that creates curiosity and inspires people to understand the craftsmanship of digital fashion. But then we also have the Fabricant Studio, which is part of the full digital fashion house, which is a platform, a scalable platform that makes everybody a digital fashion designer, like I was just talking about. But then we also have the community being super important. It's not only people who buy our digital clothing, it's people who build with us. So the so-called idea of decentralization, building the metaverse together with the community, super important. And the fourth pillar is the academy. So what we call the Fabricant Academy, where we're teaching people who don't understand how we do things, because what we do is super complex. It's fashion design, it's visual effects, it's gaming technology, it's blockchain technology. So there's a big kind of a technology component to it, and we're really sitting at the intersection between all of those. And we want to teach our community of how to become an amazing fashion designer using Clo 3D software, how to become amazing visual effects designer, how do you do lighting, materials, rendering, what do blockchain mechanics use? Like what do you need to do to have like a successful project? How do you create value for your project? So we really want to educate our community, and that way use it to actually funnel into the Fabricant Studio and the Fabricant label. So we get talent into the label. So we get design and 3D talent into the label. So we get design talent onto the Fabricant Studio. So people can help us out creating AR filters, doing asset optimization, helping us out with all the technical stuff. So that's the way we're avoiding bottlenecks when it comes down to the production line itself. So not only are we just designing clothing, we're building tech, we're building community, and we're building an education platform, because we're true believers in that we need to give to the world as much as possible. And this is part of let's say the sustainability goal. It's part of the creating the interactive experience Clo. And it's a way of scaling that. It's a way of accelerating that, because we can't do it on our own. We need to do it together. So again, 4 domains: the Fabricant label to inspire, the Fabricant Studio to onboard the mainstream audiences, the whole world, basically digital fashion experience, the community side, which is one of the most important things. If there's no community, there's no product, and the academy side to teach people and accelerate the growth of digital fashion. That's to us what our concept of a digital fashion house is. And then for all the people who wonder, how do we make money? Because there's always business people who find that very important. Well, business modeling is a creative exercise that we're constantly playing around with. So the main drivers are really from the Fabricant Studio right now. And there we have a marketplace where we have marketplace fees. And even though our legacy is, working with brands, we're kind of continuing that. We want brands to come to the platform as well, but typically these brands don't have any digital assets, so they need digital assets created, and then we can sell it on the marketplace. So, for example, if Adidas came to us and Adidas didn't have any digital assets, well, they do. Adidas has a lot of digital assets, but if they wouldn't, we would help them out with those digital assets, and we would help them onboard on there. So there's a few different components that can really be put into the business model. But the primary business model is really focused around the marketplace. So it's super important to get the volume up of quality items onto the marketplace and get the volume up for the sales as well. Because what the blockchain enables us to get a primary marketplace fee, but when those items sell further down the line, we still get secondary fees forever and forever. So, like one item that gets created on the studio right now, if it gets sold 20 years from now, we're still making royalties on those. So that's why it's super important to get these, quality items there that just keep selling for a lifetime, because that's the way you're going to exponentially grow the business model and the revenues. And it's all based on volume.
And that's obviously the power of NFTs and the blockchain
Right.
technology. I want to stick on this for a while. How you describe your business is really interesting, and how you describe the setup of your company is really interesting because, I'm always fascinated by these kind of transformational periods in time where we move from kind of one way of doing things to another. As we, mentioned at the start of this conversation, this is you're right in the thick of it. You're in the middle of it, and I find it fascinating that, I mean, you want to create a fashion industry. So you're using kind of a legacy term to describe something that's essentially very new. If you would describe sort of the similarities to the sort of legacy fashion industry to what you're doing and what's completely new, can you just, I'm sure you kind of said it just, but if you would break that down, because, you do have aspects of your business that is, I mean, whether it's design, I'm sure it's communication, you mentioned community, a bunch of these things that are kind of strong in the sort of legacy fashion business, if you call it that. But then you mentioned all other things, like I'm sure you have like 3D artists, and you have to, do interoperability with different metaverses and stuff like that the traditional fashion brands, they don't even know, they have no clue, right? So can you break that down a little bit? When are you a traditional fashion player, and when are you like a completely new thing?
Great question. I think there's a lot of different answers to that. Let me use ourselves as an example, because I think we are one of the better examples. There's a few other ones as well. But for us, as I mentioned, we're at the intersection of fashion, gaming, and blockchain. So it's really, those three different industries coming together. So it's three different skill sets, three different languages, three different cultures. So if you think of like a blockchain developer working together with a fashion designer, you can already kind of imagine that
That's
it's,
a television show.
yeah, honestly, the soap opera that happens there, and that I have a great amount of experiences in the past years, where a lot of visual effects designers came in and left very quickly as well, simply because they couldn't operate in the environment
That's
itself.
interesting.
Yeah, so that there's kind of like bringing all these different cultures into this kind of fashion mindset, this fashion world has always been a challenge. So for me, any fashion brand of the future, let's just say how a traditional fashion brand needs to change. They need to bring in people who understand 3D design, who understand 3D engineering, who understand visual effects pipelines, who understand gaming technology like Unreal Engine. And now what they're also really struggling with is the metaverse idea. So all these luxury brands that I've been speaking to years, all of a sudden they all have chief metaverse officers, some type of metaverse person who just is just coming in and has to define a strategy, but has no metaverse experience because they just don't exist. Nike is hiring like crazy. The Kering Group brands are hiring like crazy. Everybody's getting promotion to whatever, head of metaverse, director of metaverse, CEO of metaverse. So that's a big challenge for them. But the ones that are moving towards that space right now are making the right moves. They just need to figure out what does it mean for them and what's going to be super vulnerable. The traditional creative directors in fashion brands, they're very, still like, oh, I need to touch it. I need to do everything by hand rather than, hey, you can do everything with the computer these days. So again, that generational difference needs to happen. They need to get out with the old dinosaurs and they need to be bringing young super talent into it who understand these experiences. So that's going to be very, very crucial. And also to understand that the supply chain, it's not going to be some crazy fragmented experience anymore. Your full supply chain is living in the PC, so the whole fashion industry is basically in one computer, and it's just about jetting that computer down into an office and be like, okay, here we're doing everything from material creation all the way to, just understand what is the end cycle of these items. And then you can connect that later on to the physical experience. So it's really going to revolutionize the way physical fashion brands needs to operate. Does anybody in the fashion industry have that understanding? Very few, if any. I don't think anybody is capable of having the vision plus the capacity to execute the vision. Because for me, having a vision without execution is just nothing. Then you're just dreaming about a better future without being able to do it.
Let's stick on that for a while, because I'm super curious to see how this will play out. Because if there's something that not every traditional fashion brand has, but definitely the bigger ones, especially the ones in the luxury sector, I always thought that the types of fashion that have a strong kind of a community around it, a strong kind of collectability around it, will do fairly well if they can transition into digital spaces. So meaning sort of, we're already seeing sneaker culture moving into digital. No surprise there, because there's already the kind of like a community and collectability around it. I'm sure, people still, my wife is online buying sort of vintage Gucci pieces from the 70s because she likes sort of Gucci and Louis Vuitton, right? And that, what's that? It's brand, right? And it's sort of fashion history. So I'm sure that, in my mind, completely natural for them to move into digital spaces and take some of that brand value and history into the metaverse and digital. Where do you see this going? And you have also worked with some of the traditional fashion brands. Have you like a sense of how this will play out?
Yeah, I have a sense. There's going to be the ones who totally don't get it and going to lose out in the long term. And then there's the ones who are already making great steps toward the space. Nike, they bought Artifact, like a few months back, which of course was a big thing for us because it's the first time that a digitally native brand has been bought, and especially by Nike, that's a big move. And I think that came because Adidas was kind of doing their metaverse move, which was like, oh, let us buy one Bored Ape and work with G Money, who's an OG in the industry, and make our own NFT drop. It's just two different scales, but they're both moving into that space. Gucci is doing great things. Balenciaga is doing great things. That's really from the Kering group. I don't know if we've really seen anything from the LVMH group yet.
No, on the contrary, they've said that they don't want to get into it, at least right now.
Yeah, right. Which doesn't surprise me because speaking with LVMH has always been like, they're interested, but they're always like, oh, but this is not us, because they're still so kind of stuck into that old frame of thinking, and that's completely fine. But sooner or later they're also going to move into that space. So everything's a matter of timing, and I think it just comes down to when is their consumer, when is their target consumer ready to actually adopt thinking that digital Louis Vuitton is actually cool. That's the time that they're going to move into that space. But if their consumers are still like, no, we don't care anything about the metaverse, they're also not going to move into that space. These brands, they're massive. They're super smart. They have great teams who are capable of understanding what the consumers want. So they're capable of moving there. I think that the big challenge will be for the smaller brands themselves. The ones who are kind of on this constant survival mode, who are constantly just trying to get out a new collection so they can make enough money to survive the next 6 months. Those are the brands that are going to suffer the most because, first of all, they don't have the resources to understand, where the world is truly moving to. They only have, current data of the current market, but not of like what are the, like where's the market heading towards to. And, they can't move to 3D. They just like don't have that capacity. I've had so many questions from small brands come to us. It's like, yeah, we really need to move to 3D. But we don't have resources. Is there something that we can do together? And I'm like, well, hey, we're also, startup who's still just trying to get through the day with the knowledge that, hey, in the future we'll be massive, but right now we're just trying to figure it out. So that's why we started the Fabricant studio as well, which essentially should make it a little bit easier for everybody to start a digital only brand without having to have that 3D knowledge. So in the future, the Fabricant Studio will be an open ecosystem where a traditional fashion brand with no 3D capacity can come in, put their clothing on there, and sell it to, let's say, the so-called metaverse audiences.
So speaking about the the Fabricant studio, I was really fascinated about what are the tools you are giving designers, because what you're just saying is something I see in the fashion industry as well. I mean, fashion industry is just they're keeping up with digitizing their commerce, right? They can't even do a website good enough, you know, especially the smaller brands, right? And I get it; it's hard. If you work with a traditional industry for 100 years, the ways of working is like you're at a fair somewhere selling to a retailer. That's what they've been doing, and so it's not natural for them. And I kind of feel sorry for them in that sense. They don't have the skills, right? But then there are, great designers and brand builders that you really want to see thrive, and that I really would like to see moving into this direction. It feels like what you're doing with the Fabricant Studio is kind of giving them the toolbox, right? And just give me a little sense of what are the tools. And you mentioned, digital garments, stuff like that, things that takes a long time to, I'm sure, develop for a digital designer. So how does that work?
There's two components to that. First of all is the software component. So we use software to create our digital fashion items, and we just happen to use Clo 3D and Marvelous Designer for that 3D modeling of the 3D clothing. But there you need software knowledge. You need to understand patterns. You need to understand stitching, sewing. You need to understand all the craftsmanship of fashion. And so that's what our academy is for. Our academy is, really focused on those people who have the traditional background and want to understand software knowledge. So we help them out, but that's, let's say, much smaller scale. And then there's the other side, which is the Fabricant Studio, which is simplifying the digital clothing creation, and just by putting it into a tool. So if you think about how photography has gone from super complex cameras using jargon that nobody understands, like f-stop, shutter speed, iris, ISO, like most people just don't even have an understanding of that. And all of a sudden you have the smartphone there who you just click and you have a great picture that is trying to adjust the lighting for you and trying to make the picture as beautiful as possible. It's a similar type of concept of where you take the complexities of the technicalities away and give people the power of the experience to do something that they understand, because everybody uses clothing. Everybody understands how clothing functions. So it's just about creating that experience for them where they say, oh, I like those buttons and I want those buttons to be placed there. I like that zipper. I like that collar. I like that material. Just kind of simplifying the tools, putting them right in front of them. So it's as simple as, pick and choose, just take that one and create a unique combination for yourself. Like what I was saying earlier on, the avatar configurator. But right now, this is going to be a garment configurator. And right now, it's super basic. It's basically choose your garment, choose your material, create a combination, and that's your unique combination. Well, in the future, as we proceed, this tool is going to become much, much more powerful, where we try to make it almost invisible to the people, that they really feel like they are the true fashion designers, that nobody else can do this. It's not going to go as far as patterns, but it's definitely go as far as like just creating the silhouettes, creating the shapes, and adjusting things, just to give enough power to be like, hey, I did this, But people already get that sense. But we just want to make it more powerful. Because again, I use the word experience a lot, especially interactive experience. We just need to create that interactive experience that gets people, where they wake up in the morning and they're like, oh my God, I want to make my own digital fashion item on the Fabricant Studio. And it really comes from that excitement and that passion and, really seeing that you're contributing to something and that you're capable of doing something. So the Fabricant Studio is essentially going to create the designers of the future, the Virgil Ablohs, the Karl Lagerfelds, the Coco Chanels of the future are going to come from the Fabricant Studio. All the brands of the future are going to come from the platform. It's not that you're only a designer, but you could just basically go buy designer items and kind of create your own retail experience out of that. So it's just like we're really focused on, so people get to be designers, so they get to have their own brands, and that they get to make their own retail experiences. So because not everybody wants to be a designer. Some people just want to be resellers. Some people want to be creators. So we're really trying to just get to anybody who loves fashion, who loves the world of fashion, let's onboard the people who previously thought they didn't care about fashion. And now they all of a sudden they have this experience. It's like, oh my God, I actually do get what fashion is for. Because I've seen it with a lot of basic bros, who like to wear a white t-shirt or black t-shirt, where all of a sudden they're questioning themselves. It's like, I don't want just a black t-shirt in the metaverse. In the metaverse, I want something crazy. I want to be much more expressive because I have this need, but I'm just scared of doing it in my real life. But in the metaverse, it's a safe space to be doing that.
Yeah, super fascinating. I have a question about a detail. I don't know why, but I feel like I need to ask it. In developing sort of digital garments, how much is that a function of someone native in 3D worlds creating something, and how much is it a function of sort of researching how traditional garments, or even taking in the knowledge of a traditional, someone who knows fabrics? Do you have that sort of intersection in the development? It's a really, detailed question, but I'm just curious if there is a transition there.
Well, let me see if I can answer it correctly. We have material creators. We have special material creators right now, like one company who's doing prints for all the luxury fashion companies in Paris. They're actually part of the experience, so it's a professional material creator who puts the material on the platform. And then you get to, take that material and connect it to a fashion creator, for somebody who designed a silhouette, let's say a dress or a shirt, that's also a professional fashion designer. But then you have what we call the co-creator or the user, who just comes in and just like picks what they like and creates those unique combinations. So it's actually, it's a combination of somebody who's professional from the fashion industry versus somebody who's completely not professional from the fashion industry. Then co-creating with each other, and both of them making royalties on the item. So basically that everybody profits. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. Listen, Kerry, I want to end on a note that, prior to this interview, we had a short conversation, and I have this idea of doing a bunch of interviews on this topic that we will do during the spring. And it's really about values. And, we're Scandinavian Mind. And we're called Scandinavian Mind because we cover the Nordics, and we feel like we have there is something in common here in the way we approach the world. You can talk about that forever, but I'm curious to your experience of this. And you have a sort of Finnish American background, and I'm curious to hear a little bit about your upbringing. But what I'm really curious about is there something from your upbringing and from your Nordic background that you are bringing with you in creating your company, but also ultimately creating these new digital worlds? Because a lot of what's happening right now is we are creating new environments, new spaces, new countries, new lands and stuff. And it's kind of like a new frontier, and you have a chance to decide what kind of world we want there. And to me, it's really interesting to talk about what are the values we are bringing into this. It's a kind of a huge question. I don't know where you want to start with it, maybe, perhaps with your background, but I'm curious to have your take on this.
Yeah, and I love the topic as well, and definitely something that I never get asked, and something that I think about every single day. Because for me, running a company, it has all the so-called Finnish values or the Nordic values. Sustainability is a big one. I think in the Nordics, we're very good at it. It's something that's inherently in our culture, and something that I would say the rest of the world is not so good at. At least Central Europeans, they don't really care about it. So if you really think about what are the Nordic values, it's like it's sustainability, or like preserving the environment for its natural resources, creativity and innovation. Especially Sweden is really known for its music, for its design, interior design, so many different aspects. And you're really good at talking about it in the world as well. Finland has great stuff, but they're just not capable of getting it out of Finland for some reason. Because that's again one part of those values. We're humble. You don't boast about the things that you do good. It's just like we just like always very quality focused. And, it's just like we think that the product itself will sell itself when it's good enough. And that quality is something that is always super important. And then, of course, equality is very important. Compassion, trust, openness, transparency. Those are a lot of the things that I speak about with my friends in Finland. Something that is very, very core to our nature. And that's why I think running a business should be the same. It should not be like profit first and people last. No, it has to really just balance. It's about people, but it is about profit, but it's also about the planet. So the triple P that you probably see in some places, people, planet, profit. And it's just like how do you balance those? Some people are profit, planet, people. I mean, most companies these days will be like, yeah, we're all about the planet and the people, and we don't care about profit. But then when it comes down to the end of the day, profit is still the most important thing, and that really drives decision making for companies. And I decided that's like it can't drive the conversation, and it's so clear working here in Amsterdam where I'm based. Working with traditional finance people, they're so focused on decision making from an Excel sheet. And for me, that is like almost to the form disgusting of like, how can you decide on somebody else's health, somebody else's what they need to do and the decisions that they need to do every single day simply because some tab on an Excel sheet says that we need to make money over there. That to me is so far away from the values that I embody for myself and for my background. So because we're questioning a whole industry, we're questioning, the whole existence of an industry. We need to also question how businesses are being run. We're not going to innovate and create a whole new world if we're still running business like business has been traditionally run. So that's why we need to run the business in a completely different ways. And the values that we speak about at the Fabricant, the three core values, it's about having fun, because innovation doesn't happen if you're not having fun. If you don't have a fail-free environment where people will clap for you because you failed and fell on your stomach. But it's all about getting up. It's about resilience and grit, like very typical cliche startup words, but they're very relevant. It's just about constantly doing things over and over again until it really starts working. Collaboration. So collaboration, working together with teams, but working together with the community as well, being collaborative. Decentralization is another thing, so I'm a very competitive person, but I'm also know how to collaborate at the same time. So it's finding that balance between competition and collaboration, and then empathy, really trusting the people, really giving them autonomy, independence, really empowering somebody to be the best version of themselves. For me, that's the most important thing in my personal relationships, where we elevate each other and not just like being toxic and, taking somebody else down. No, every single person who works at the Fabricant needs to be empowered to be the best version of themselves. And if they don't fit into that culture, they will filter themselves out. They'll be like, oh, I'd rather go work for a place where I have a boss and just tells me what to do and I sit there from 9 to 5. I've come across a lot of people like that as well. And some people really want that, and that's completely fine. But working at the Fabricant is about self-growth. It's about challenging yourself. It's about learning about yourself. It's about constantly questioning the status quo. Like I don't differentiate between an intern and myself in the company. But I do realize there's an experience difference, and there's a difference in kind of everything that you see in life. But, for me, it's just as important to be listening to the interns as it is to be listening to the leadership team. So that to me is very inherent to the values of the Nordics. But when I go to Finland, I don't see it there. They might be talking about those values, but in the end of the day, a lot of people are running business just to make more money. And that to me is not the way you're going to innovate any industry.
Whereabouts in Finland are you from?
Hollola. That's next to Lahti, which is like where we have the big competition for skiing and ski jumping. It's about 100 kilometers from Helsinki north. I'm a small town Finnish boy, but I left Finland back in 1995. So I'm capable of embodying both, which is really like have this kind of small town mentality, but acting like a big city. But for me, I still prefer like one day I was just going to buy a wooden cabin by a lake far away from people and divide my time between like London, New York, and then when I really need to get away from the craziness, let's go back to my hometown and just live a very quiet and simple life over there.
Kerry Murphy, co-founder of the Fabricant, grew up in the north of Finland, bringing his Nordic values to building a new fashion industry. Thank you so much for speaking to me today.
And thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
You have listened to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our show about the intersection of lifestyle and technology. Every Friday, me and my team talk about the current trends and events within business, tech, fashion, design, culture, and more, from the Nordic perspective of our team of editors and contributors. And every other Wednesday, you'll hear Values in the Metaverse, this interview podcast covering the digital fashion, Metaverse, and NFTs. Or you will hear Konst, our podcast about the current and future world of art, hosted by my colleague Roland Philipp Kretschmar. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to stay updated on the latest news and learn about upcoming talks and events. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. I'm Conrad Olsen. Until next time, goodbye.